Hello everyone, welcome to yet another session of the Daily News Analysis by SRIRAM'S IAS, where we take up the important articles featuring in the Hindu newspaper and break them down for our understanding from the UPSC examination point of view. So let's start with our discussion today, taking the important articles featuring in the New Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper. So let's start with the first article for the day. The first article which appears in the newspaper reads, "Toward legalizing same-sex marriage." Now, this particular article appears in the newspaper in the backdrop of two petitions that were instituted in the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court in the same petitions has asked from the center's reply to this petition. And what is this petition? It is being instituted by two couples who want same-sex marriage to be legalized. So they are this means that they are a couple belonging to the same sex and they want to solemnize their marriage under the Special Marriage Act. So the Special Marriage Act is a system under the Indian laws for those who do not want to pursue marriage in a personal law point of view, in the ritualistic point of view, but in the other manner, so that for them the Special Marriage Act is there. So the petition is to legalize same-sex marriage under the Special Marriage Act. So in this backdrop, the Supreme Court has asked the center for its reply or stand on this particular issue. So using this article, we'll understand what this case in the Supreme Court is all about, what the government holds a stand with respect to same-sex marriage under the Indian laws, what do the laws have to say on to this, and what have been the previous Supreme Court observations on the same issue. So this becomes important for us from the GS2 point of view and as well as GS1 point of view. So let's analyze the issue from that perspective. So what is happening? As we said, a Supreme Court bench led by Chief Justice of India D.Y. Chandrachud issued notices to the centre and the Attorney General of India seeking their responses to two petitions filed to allow solemnization of same-sex marriage under the Special Marriage Act. So this is the stage right now. This non-recognition of same-sex marriage amounted to discrimination that struck at the root of dignity and self-fulfillment of the LGBTQ plus couples. Now, when I talk about the LGBTQ plus community, can anyone put their comments in the comment box and tell me what all these words stand for, the LGBTQ plus community? So the basic root is that by allowing marriages between different genders but not allowing them for the same sex couple is actually amounting to non-recognition of their rights and discrimination that struck at the root of dignity and self-fulfillment. So this is their stand, and that is why they want this same-sex marriage to be legalized under the Special Marriage Act. And currently there are a total of 9 petitions pending before the High Court of Delhi and Kerala. So in front of the various high courts there are total 9 petitions pending to recognize the same issue, that is same-sex marriages under the act such as the Special Marriage Act, Foreign Marriage Act and other codified personal laws. So recently via these petitions the Supreme Court transferred these various pending issues before the high courts in front of itself. So now Supreme Court will cumulatively hear all this petition and decide on this pertinent question as to whether the same-sex marriages between couples can be legalized in our Indian codified laws or not. So this is with respect to the case right now. Now, what are the petitioners arguing or what are their demands? So their case is that the Special Marriage Act provides a civil form of marriage for couples who cannot marry under their personal law. So it can be the personal law of either communities. So the act, and their argument is that the act is ultra vires to the constitution to the extent that it discriminates between the same-sex couples and opposite sex couples, which means that it allows opposite sex couples to get married but it denies the same right to the same sex couples, and that is why the petition says that this Special Marriage Act is unconstitutional in the manner because it violates Article 14 and it violates the rights of the LGBTQ community, where it denies them the marriage in their own right, both legal rights as well as the social recognition and status that flows from marriage. So by debarring the marriage for same-sex couple communities, it is basically discriminating between people of the country, and that is why the petitioners say that this particular Special Marriage Act is actually unconstitutional. So the petitioners emphasize that the Special Marriage Act ought to apply to a marriage between any two persons regardless of their gender identity and their sexual orientation. So they seek to recognize same-sex marriage in a relation to this act and not the personal act. So their petition is very clear. They want the same-sex marriage to be legalized and recognized under the Special Marriage Act, and if it does not recognize, the Special Marriage Act can be held as unconstitutional because it is discriminating between people. So this is the petitioner's side. Now what is the government answering on this? So in this particular case, the Supreme Court has asked the government and the Attorney General for their replies, but the government has replied in the previous set of cases in front of the various high courts. So from that stand, we can gather what government has to say with respect to legalizing same-sex marriage. So what is the government stance? In 2021, in one such case, while responding to the pleas seeking recognition of the same-sex marriages in the Delhi High Court, the centre said, the Solicitor General for the centre said that as per the law, marriage was permissible between a biological man and a biological woman. So their answer was that in the Indian laws, only marriage that was permissible was between that of a biological man and a biological woman. So this was their first answer, and the centre had said that the acceptance of the institution of marriage between two individuals of the same gender is neither recognized nor accepted in any uncodified personal law or any codified statutory law. So the Indian government in the form of a response to the question of whether the same-sex marriages can be legalized or not, their stand was in either any uncodified personal law, either any custom or historical tradition. So either in any uncodified personal law or any codified laws up until now, whatever laws have been codified, in both these instruments, same-sex marriage has not been institutionalized or legalized, and therefore they also hold the same view. And in the earlier case as well, they said that marriage under the law was only permissible between a biological man and a biological woman. So this is where the clash happens, where the citizens, especially the LGBTQ plus community, want this particular aspect to be legalized, and therefore the case is in front of the Supreme Court now. Now let's talk about the Supreme Court's observation which have been until now. This particular case is there, but we have had a long journey with respect to recognition of the LGBTQ community rights, and it started way back in 2014, when in the Nalsa versus Union of India judgment in 2014, the court had said that non-binary individuals were protected under the Constitution and fundamental rights such as equality, non-discrimination, life, freedom, and so on, and could not be restricted to those who were biological male or female. So the first dent, or the first significant step, one can say, in identifying the rights of the LGBTQ plus community people was in the form of this judgment, which said that people who were not identifying to certain genders does not mean that they can be robbed of equality or they can be subjected to discrimination. So it recognized their rights, it recognized their dignity, and that is why this became a landmark judgment. Then came the judgment of Shafeen Jahan versus Ashokan KM in the Supreme Court in 2018, where the Supreme Court held that the right to marry a person of one's choice is integral to Article 21 of the Constitution. So we know Article 21 of the Constitution guarantees right to life and liberty under the Constitution. So under the same article, many substantive rights have been interpreted by the Supreme Court. So under the same article, it interpreted that the right to marry a person of one's own choice, now that can be any person, he can belong to any sexual orientation. So under this particular judgment as well, there can be a step which is favorable to the community's cause. So this became another judgment to their cause. And then finally, in the year 2018, a landmark judgment came where the Supreme Court in Navtej Johar versus others versus the Union of India, in the form of a landmark judgment, which was also headed by the current Chief Justice D.Y. Chandrachud, it held that the members of the LGBTQ community are entitled as all other citizens to the full range of constitutional rights, including the liberties protected by the Constitution, and are entitled to equal citizenship and equal protection of the law. Basically, this judgment became landmark because it decriminalized same-sex consensual union as under the Indian Penal Code under Section 377. This particular act was identified as a criminal act which was punishable for a 10-year imprisonment. So the landmark judgment basically decriminalized same-sex relations, and the Supreme Court decriminalized homosexuality in 2018, urging the LGBTQ community to forgive history of the brutal suppression. And the 5-judge bench had unanimously held that criminalization of private consensual sexual conduct between adults of the same sex under Section 377 of the IPC was clearly unconstitutional. So these 3 judgments which have been come into the light right now, up until now, and Supreme Court's view on them can give us a position as to how the Supreme Court has interpreted and given much wings to the rights of the LGBTQ community. So in the light of this, the case stands in at this position where the Supreme Court has had certain set of judgments. The government will file its stand, and what Supreme Court decides on the further issue. So a lot of petitioners are saying that where in 2018 the same-sex relations were decriminalized, now the next step logically is to legalize the same-sex marriage. So this issue is pending in the Supreme Court right now. But what is the global scenario when we talk about legalization of same-sex marriage? So the first country that was the one to legalize same-sex marriage was the Netherlands, which did it way back in 2001. And other countries, so in them globally 32 countries have legalized same-sex marriages either through legislations or by judicial pronouncements or the judgments of their highest courts. So many countries first recognize the same-sex civil unions as the escalatory step to recognizing homosexual marriage. Now, what is this term called? Same-sex civil union. This can be called as a step previous to marriage, where marriage is a recognition of the union between two people. The civil union are similar arrangements as marriages which provide legal recognition of unmarried couples of the same or opposite sex in order to grant them some of the rights that come with marriage. So in order to facilitate the rights that come with marriage to other people as well, the civil unions are often recognized by various countries, where they get access to these rights such as inheritance, medical benefits, employee benefits to spouses, managing joint taxes and finances, and in some cases even adoption. So this kind of civil unions also many countries have indulged into, and this can also be a way to go forward. And therefore in some countries the decriminalization of homosexuality was not followed for years by the recognition of same-sex marriage. For instance, in the United States, where the former, that is decriminalization of the homosexuality, happened in 2003, and legalizing the same-sex marriage happened in the year 2015. So there have been cases where there has been a significant gap also in between these two events. So now it remains to be seen what the Indian Supreme Court decides on this matter. So we finish this issue over here, and with this let's move on to our next issue for the same. The next article which appears in the newspaper reads, "What is blue bugging and how is it used to hack Bluetooth enabled devices?" Now this particular article appears in the newspaper because of the rising cases of a phenomenon known as blue bugging, which is a form of cyber attack, one can say, on the mobile devices of people. So what exactly is blue bugging, and why does it become important from the UPSC examination point of view? Because we often see questions in the prelims examination asking questions on the new terms that are floating in the market and are often important or connected to the syllabus of the examination. So in that aspect, blue bugging becomes important, and we need to know certain important facets of blue bugging. So what is blue bugging? Let's understand what exactly is blue bugging. So this blue bugging is a form of hacking that lets attackers access a device through its discoverable Bluetooth connection. So there are various methods to hack a cell phone or hack an electronic device, but this particular method of hacking essentially makes use of the Bluetooth connection of a victim's mobile phone. So whenever their Bluetooth connection is in the discoverable mode and he or she is in the proximity of the hacker where the Bluetooth can function, this particular attack can be initiated on that victim's phone and the device's access can be granted, and therefore various other activities can be given action to. So once a device or a phone is blue bugged, a hacker can listen to the calls, read and send messages, and steal and modify contacts as well. So a simple entry via the Bluetooth connection can result into all these activities. Therefore, blue bugging attacks work by exploiting Bluetooth enabled devices. Once a connection is established, hackers can use brute force attacks to bypass authentication, and they can install malware in the compromised device to gain unauthorized access to it. So the attack is not just limited to accessing the phone via the Bluetooth connection, but it's an entry point where after the hacker gets access to the phone, various other malwares can be installed on the device, and therefore once hacked, the hacker can make and listen to calls, read and send messages, and modify and steal the contacts as well. So therefore any Bluetooth enabled device, including wireless earbuds, are susceptible to such hacks, and that is why the cases are rising right now, because the use of such Bluetooth enabled devices or wireless Bluetooth earpods have substantially increased. So this is the phenomenon of Bluetooth bugging. Now if we can ask, how can we prevent ourselves from this attack of blue bugging? So there are certain safeguards which we can undertake in order to prevent ourselves from blue bugging. So how can we do that? Turning off the Bluetooth and disconnecting paired Bluetooth devices when not in use is the first logical step to take. In that, since the attack works when the device and the Bluetooth of the device is in discoverable mode, it makes sense to disconnect the Bluetooth when not in use and to update the device's system software to the latest version. So software update takes care of the bug fixes that might be there in the device. So software update is one. And third is limited use of public Wi-Fi. Since the usage of public Wi-Fi can make the device vulnerable to other attacks, therefore the public Wi-Fi should be used limited, and most important is using a VPN as an additional security measure. So the article suggests that the usage of VPN in a mobile device can protect the device from the phenomenon of Bluetooth bugging. And last is that one should always monitor data usage for sudden spikes. So whenever there's unnoticed activity or certain unsolicited activity on the device, one should be careful for that in order to understand whether the device has been compromised or not. So this was the discussion today on these important articles. We finish here today and we'll meet again tomorrow with the important articles from the newspaper. Thank you.